My name is Daniel Harris, and for most of my adult life, I believe I had achieved what many people call the American dream. I had a steady career in finance, a beautiful home in the suburbs of Chicago, and a wife, Mina, who I thought was my partner in everything. To everyone else, we looked like the perfect couple, successful, admired, and living the kind of life that others envied. But behind that polished image, small cracks began to appear. Mina grew distant, often coming home late from work, brushing off my questions with excuses about deadlines and late-night meetings. I wanted to trust her, but something in her eyes told me the truth was different. Then there was Richard Cole, her boss, a man with charm, influence, and a reputation for blurring the line between professional and personal. At first, I ignored the signs. Maybe I was naive, or maybe I didn't want to admit that my marriage could crumble so easily. But when I discovered the truth, the betrayal cut deeper than I ever imagined. Still, instead of rage, I chose silence, because I knew one day the divorce would reveal the secret plan I had quietly set in motion. Before we begin, I would appreciate it if you like this video. You can help me continue to spread the meaningful lesson. If you haven't subscribed yet, I recommend you subscribe and turn on the bell so you don't miss any videos. If you like this video, please comment 1. If you don't like it, please comment 0 to let me know so I can make a better video for you. Now let's get started. I used to believe my life was the kind of story people dreamed about. Looking back now, I realize how fragile that illusion was. But at the time, I thought I had everything. My name is Daniel Harris, and I grew up in a working-class family in Ohio. My father was a machinist, my mother a school secretary, and together they raised me with 2 simple values. Work hard and protect what you earn. I carried those lessons into adulthood. By the time I turned 35, I was living in Chicago, working in finance, and making more money than I ever imagined as a kid. It was during those years of long hours and climbing ladders that I met Mina. She was vibrant, witty, and had this way of making everyone around her feel like they were the center of the room. We met at a networking event downtown, the kind of thing I usually hated but couldn't avoid if I wanted to advance in my career. Mina wasn't like anyone I had met before. She wasn't just beautiful, though she was, in that effortless way that drew eyes without her even trying. She was ambitious. She talked about her career goals, her love for travel, and her vision of building a life that was more than ordinary. That ambition pulled me in. It felt like we were a match. Me with stability, her with fire. Within a year, we were married. We bought a home in the suburbs, one of those neighborhoods with neatly trimmed lawns and neighbors who wave from their driveways. To the outside world, we looked like the picture-perfect couple. I had my career. Mina had her rising position in marketing, and together, we checked every box of the American dream. The nice cars, the vacations to Florida and California, the dinner parties with friends who admired our lifestyle. I'll admit, I was proud. Growing up the way I did, I never imagined I'd be living behind white picket fences. My parents used to say, "Don't reach too high. Disappointment hurts more than failure." But I reached anyway, and Mina made me feel like we were unstoppable. In those early years, Mina was affectionate, supportive, and seemed genuinely invested in our marriage. She'd leave little notes in my briefcase, cook dinners when I came home late, and talk about the future. Kids, a bigger house, maybe even starting our own business one day. I believed her every word. But looking back now, I realized there were signs that I ignored. Subtle things, easy to dismiss at the time, but glaring in hindsight. Mina always talked about wanting more recognition at work, more luxury in our lives, more excitement. I used to laugh it off, thinking it was just her drive talking. After all, ambition was one of the things I loved about her. But ambition can be a double-edged sword, especially when paired with temptation. At work, Mina's boss was Richard Cole. He was the kind of man people either admired or resented. In his mid-40s, divorced, with the kind of confidence that comes from money and power, Richard had a reputation in the industry. He knew how to charm clients, motivate his team, and, if the rumors were true, blur boundaries with women who worked under him. I didn't think much of it at first. Why would I? Mina always assured me that Richard was simply a mentor, someone who recognized her talent and pushed her to excel. And she was excelling. Promotions, bonuses, invitations to travel for conferences. Every success she had, I celebrated. I thought it was our success. Our weekends were filled with brunches, barbecues, and the kind of social gatherings where couples compared careers and vacations like trophies. Mina loved being the center of attention, and she thrived in those environments. I played my role as a proud husband, standing by her side, smiling when people complimented us as the power couple. I didn't realize then how much of it was a performance. The illusion of perfection was strong. My parents adored Mina, my colleagues envied me, and my friends often joked that I had married out of my league. I wore that like a badge of honor, not realizing that sometimes marrying someone out of your league isn't about beauty or charm. It's about values. And Mina's values, I would later learn, were very different from mine. There were moments that, in hindsight, should have unsettled me more than they did. Late-night phone calls she brushed off as work emergencies. Weekend trips to networking events where she came back with vague stories and expensive gifts she claimed were company perks. At the time, I trusted her. Or maybe I convinced myself I had to. After all, trust is the backbone of marriage, isn't it? And I had no desire to be the paranoid husband who questioned every move his wife made. What I didn't realize then was that Mina was testing the boundaries of that trust. And Richard, her boss, the man who had everything except loyalty, was more than willing to help her push those boundaries. Still, during those years, I held on to the illusion. I told myself that every marriage had rough patches. The first cracks in our marriage appeared so quietly. They almost blended into the noise of everyday life. If you weren't paying close attention, you might have missed them. I almost did, but in hindsight, they were there all along, subtle signs that the illusion of perfection was starting to break. Mina began coming home later and later. At first, it was once or twice a week. She would say she had a meeting that ran long, or that her team was pulling late nights to finish a campaign. I didn't question it much. In my world, long hours were a badge of honor. When I was climbing the ladder in finance, I often stayed at the office past midnight. I thought Mina was simply doing what ambitious people did. But then, her explanations grew thinner, less detailed. Instead of telling me about the work she was doing, she just said, I had to stay late, with a tone that shut down further conversation. She would change the subject quickly, asking about my day or feigning exhaustion. I brushed it off, telling myself not to be paranoid. One night, I remember sitting at our kitchen counter around 10 o'clock, a half-finished glass of bourbon in my hand. Mina walked in, her hair slightly tousled, perfume lingering stronger than usual. She kissed me on the cheek, but I was distracted, absent. I asked how work was. She smiled faintly and said, busy as always. Then she disappeared upstairs to shower. I stared at the empty doorway long after she was gone, a knot twisting in my stomach. The next morning, I noticed a new bracelet on her wrist, a sleek, expensive-looking piece that I hadn't seen before. When I asked, she said it was a gift from her company for her outstanding performance. She laughed it off, saying Richard liked to reward his employees personally when they did well. I tried to smile, but something about the explanation felt rehearsed, too smooth. Still, I swallowed my doubts. I told myself not to overthink it. The problem was these small things kept piling up. Mina started guarding her phone like it was a state secret. She used to leave it lying around the house, sometimes even asking me to check a message for her while she was cooking. Now, it was always face down on the table, locked with a passcode I didn't know. If a text came in while we were together, she'd quickly silence it and tuck the phone into her bag. I noticed, but I didn't say anything. A part of me didn't want to know the truth, because deep down, I already suspected it. And then there was Richard. I met him properly at one of Mina's company parties. He was everything I had heard about, tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of smile that belonged to someone who knew exactly how much power he held. He shook my hand firmly, looked me straight in the eye, and said, "So you're Daniel. Mina talks about you all the time." I wanted to believe him, but I couldn't shake the feeling that his words carried a different weight. The way he glanced at Mina, the way she looked back at him. It wasn't the professional dynamic I wanted to see. Their chemistry was subtle but undeniable, like a current running beneath the surface. As the night went on, I watched Richard work the room, laughing loudly, clapping men on the back, drawing women into his orbit. He was charismatic, no doubt about it. But when his attention returned to Mina, I felt my chest tighten. She glowed under his gaze, like a flower turning toward the sun. On the drive home, I asked Mina about him. She said Richard was just a mentor, someone who recognized her potential. She brushed off my unease, teasing me for being a little jealous. I laughed along, pretending it didn't bother me. But inside, the seed of doubt had already been planted. As the months passed, Mina grew more detached from me. We still had our social life, dinners with friends, family gatherings. But even then, I noticed how her smile didn't reach her eyes the way it used to. She seemed to be living in two worlds, the one we had built together and another one where I wasn't invited. One Saturday afternoon, I suggested we go away for a weekend, just the two of us. A road trip to Michigan, maybe, or a few days in Napa. Mina hesitated before answering. I don't know if I can get away, she said. Work is intense right now. Just a weekend, I pressed. We could use it, don't you think? Her response was quick, almost offensive. Daniel, not everything can be fixed with a vacation. You don't understand the pressure I'm under. The conversation ended there, but her words stung. It wasn't just a dismissal. It was the implication that I was somehow out of touch with her life. We were supposed to be partners, yet I felt like a spectator. The more distant she became, the more I started noticing patterns. Her late nights often coincided with Richard's business trips. She started wearing new clothes, more expensive than usual, and I knew her salary hadn't changed that drastically. She began wearing perfume I hadn't. It's strange how betrayal doesn't always reveal itself in a grand, cinematic moment. Sometimes it creeps in through whispers, through half-truths, through the weight of things left unsaid. For me, the truth about Mina didn't explode all at once. It unraveled piece by piece until it finally crushed me. The breaking point came on a Thursday night in late autumn. The air outside was sharp with the first hints of winter, the trees in our neighborhood shedding their leaves until the streets were littered with gold and red. Mina had told me she'd be working late again. I didn't argue. By then, I had learned that questioning her only led to cold silences or sharp retorts. But something in my gut wouldn't let me rest that night. Call it instinct, or maybe just the accumulation of months of unease. I left the house around 9 and drove downtown toward Mina's office building. I told myself I was being irrational, that I'd see her car in the lot and drive back home, relieved. Instead, what I saw froze me in place. Mina's car was parked outside a high-end hotel a few blocks from her office. I recognized it instantly. The silver Lexus I had helped her pick out 2 years ago, gleaming under the streetlights. My chest tightened. I pulled into a spot across the street and sat there for what felt like an eternity, staring at that car, hoping for some explanation that made sense. But deep down, I already knew. An hour later, the doors of the hotel swung open, and there they were. Mina and Richard, walking side by side, laughing softly like two people who had the world to themselves. She wore a black dress I had never seen before, the kind of dress you don't buy for a late meeting. Richard's hand brushed against hers casually, but intimately, like it was second nature. I remember gripping the steering wheel, so hard my knuckles turned white. My first instinct was to get out of the car, to confront them right there in the street, to scream, to demand answers, to shatter the facade she had built. But I didn't move. I sat there in silence, my heart pounding, my throat dry, every fiber of my body screaming at me to act. And yet, I stayed frozen, because in that moment, something deeper took hold. Anger would have given them power. Rage would have turned me into the desperate, broken husband Richard probably expected me to be. No, I told myself this wasn't the time. This was just the beginning. I followed them at a distance as they walked to her car. They kissed briefly before parting ways. Richard heading toward his own black BMW. Mina slipping behind the wheel of the Lexus. My wife, who had just kissed another man I didn't see me. When I finally drove home that night, I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I didn't smash anything, though I felt like every part of me was cracking apart. Instead, I poured myself a drink and sat in silence, staring at the wedding photo on the mantel. There we were, Daniel and Mina, smiling in front of family and friends, rings fresh on our fingers, promises thick in the air. That version of us was gone, erased by the image burned into my mind of her walking out of that hotel with Richard. The days that followed were a blur. Mina continued her charade, coming home late, offering vague excuses. I played along, masking my knowledge behind practiced smiles and polite nods. Each time she lied to my face, it was like a knife twisting deeper. But with every lie, my resolve hardened. I began to collect evidence, quietly, methodically. If Mina thought she could betray me and walk away with half of everything I had built, she was mistaken. Illinois divorce law was clear. Infidelity didn't automatically strip a spouse of assets, but evidence could influence the outcome in court. More importantly, it could destroy her credibility. I hired a private investigator, an old college friend who had gone into that line of work after leaving the police force. Within 2 weeks, I had photos, timestamps, and hotel records. Mina and Richard weren't even cautious. They used the same hotel repeatedly, checked it under aliases so flimsy it was almost insulting. The investigator even caught them dining together at a steakhouse, Mina laughing with that same glow she once reserved for me. The hardest part wasn't seeing the evidence. It was pretending I didn't know. Every morning, I'd sit across from her at breakfast, sipping my coffee while she scrolled through her phone, offering me nothing but scraps of conversation. Every night, I'd lie in bed beside her, her body turned away from mine, while I thought about the photos sitting in a folder in my desk drawer. I felt humiliated, yes, but more than that, I felt a strange calm settle over me. The kind of calm that comes not from acceptance, but from resolve. Mina had betrayed me in the most gut-wrenching way possible, and Richard had thought he could manipulate the situation to his advantage. They both underestimated me. They thought I was blind, oblivious. Thou. Silence became my closest ally. In the weeks after I confirmed Mina's betrayal, I didn't confront her, didn't shout, didn't demand explanations. Outwardly, I played the role of the oblivious husband. Steady, predictable, almost boring. Inside, though, I was a different man entirely. Every word she spoke, every lie she told, every night she came home late, it all fueled the fire I kept hidden behind calm eyes. I knew the rules of the game had changed. If I confronted her impulsively, she would deny it, twist it, maybe even turn it against me. And Richard, with his money, charm, and influence, would step in and protect her. I couldn't afford to fight a battle of emotions. This wasn't about emotions anymore. It was about strategy. The first step was financial. In Illinois, like most states, divorce law favored equitable distribution, not necessarily equal. Judges considered contribution, credibility, and behavior. Mina assumed, I'm sure, that she'd walk away with half of everything. Half the house, half the accounts, half the life I had built. But I wasn't about to hand her the fruits of my labor, so she could go play house with Richard. I started small, moving liquid assets into accounts she didn't know about, not in my name, but in a trust one set up quietly with the help of my lawyer, a sharp man named David Greenberg. David had seen it all. Men who lost everything in divorces because they came unprepared, blindsided by betrayal. When I told him what I had uncovered, he didn't blink. You've got 2 options, he said, leaning back in his leather chair during our first meeting. Confront her and watch her lawyer tear you apart. Or build your case, protect yourself, and let her walk into the courtroom thinking she's already won. I chose the second option. David guided me through the process of moving funds legally, restructuring my accounts, and documenting every dollar Mina hadn't contributed to. He reminded me of the importance of appearances. Don't change your lifestyle too suddenly. Don't give her a reason to suspect. Keep playing the husband role until the time is right. So that's what I did. At home, I cooked dinners, asked about her day, and nodded at her excuses. I even planned a weekend getaway for us, which she predictably declined because of work commitments. I smiled, kissed her forehead, and told her I understood. Inside, I felt like a chess player moving pawns across the board while my opponent thought she was winning. The second step was evidence. The photos from the investigator weren't enough. I wanted everything airtight. I had phone records subpoenaed quietly through David. We traced late-night calls, texts, and even emails between her and Richard. Every breadcrumb painted a picture of a woman who had abandoned her vows long before I stopped believing in them. I also kept my records. Whenever Mina lied about working late, I made a note in my journal, attaching receipts, timestamps, and anything that could later show a pattern of deception. I wasn't going to rely on hearsay or emotional outbursts. When the time came, I wanted facts, cold, undeniable facts. But strategy isn't just legal or financial. Strategy is psychological. And here's where silence became my sharpest weapon. Mina expected suspicion. She expected arguments, maybe even accusations. What she didn't expect was serenity. When she lied to my face, I smiled. When she came home late, I asked if she was hungry. When she grew distant, I responded with patience. My calmness unnerved her. I could see it in her eyes. She didn't know if I was truly oblivious or if I had already moved past caring. That uncertainty was my shield. Meanwhile, I began slowly untangling myself from her emotionally. I stopped sharing my inner world, stopped confiding in her, stopped letting her see the parts of me she once had access to. I became polite but distant, like a roommate rather than a husband. And Mina, absorbed in her affair, barely noticed. She thought she was outsmarting me. She thought she was in control. But I wasn't just protecting myself. I was setting traps. One evening, I casually suggested Mina handle some of the household bills, something she rarely did. She waved me off, uninterested, but I left the envelope of statements on the counter anyway. When she skimmed them, I saw her eyes narrow. Some accounts were missing. She didn't say anything, but I knew she noticed. That was intentional. A breadcrumb for her to chew on, a subtle reminder that she didn't know as much as she thought. Richard, too, became part of my silent strategy. I never confronted him, never even hinted that I knew, but I made sure word of his reputation at the office reached the right ears. Quiet conversations with colleagues, subtle questions at company events. Nothing direct, just enough to plant doubt in people's minds. By the time rumors circled back to him, he wouldn't know where they started. My silence also extended to family and friends. I didn't tell. Divorce court has a certain smell to it. A mix of stale paper, cheap coffee, and the tension of broken promises. When I walked into that courtroom on a gray Monday morning, I wasn't the same man Mina had been lying to for months. I wasn't the betrayed husband anymore. I was calm, deliberate, almost surgical. Every step I took echoed with the weight of preparation. Mina arrived a few minutes later, heels clicking across the tile, dressed in a tailored navy suit that screamed confidence. She smiled faintly when she saw me, the kind of smile people wear when they believe they're already victorious. Behind her was Richard, though he kept a calculated distance, pretending to be just another supporter. I caught the flicker of arrogance in his eyes, the same look I'd seen the night he walked out of that hotel with her. They thought today would be easy. Mina would walk away with half. Richard would sweep in as a savior, and I would fade into the background like some bitter footnote. They were wrong. My lawyer, David Greenberg, leaned in before we sat down. Remember, no emotions. Let me do the talking. The evidence will speak for itself. I nodded. I had already practiced silence for months. Today would be no different. The judge entered, and the proceedings began. Mina's attorney painted her as a devoted wife trapped in a loveless marriage, claiming she had contributed equally to our lifestyle and deserved her share. Mina nodded along, casting me sympathetic glances, as though she were the victim. I almost laughed. The performance was impressive, but I had seen better actors on late-night TV. When it was our turn, David stood, calm and methodical. He began by dismantling the illusion of Mina's equal contribution. He presented financial records showing that nearly every asset, from the house to the investments, had been built from my income. Mina's contributions were minimal at best, and in some cases, non-existent. Mina shifted in her seat, but she held her smile. She still thought this was just the opening move. Then David produced a folder, the one filled with months of evidence. Photos, timestamps, hotel receipts, phone records. He laid them out one by one, his voice steady as he explained the pattern of deception. Mina's face paled. Richard's jaw tightened. The judge leaned forward, adjusting his glasses as he examined the evidence. "Mrs. Harris," he said, his tone sharp, "do you dispute any of this?" Mina opened her mouth, but no words came out. Her lawyer scrambled, muttering about irrelevance and personal matters. But the damage was already done. The courtroom could feel it. The story she had crafted, the faithful wife betrayed by an unfeeling husband, had shattered in seconds. I sat still, hands folded, eyes fixed on the table in front of me. Inside, my chest burned with satisfaction. Months of silence, of restraint, of biting my tongue. It all paid off in this moment. Mina wasn't just exposed. She was stripped bare in front of everyone. Richard shifted uncomfortably, avoiding my gaze. For the first time, I saw cracks in his armor. His reputation, his influence, they meant nothing here. He wasn't on trial, but he might as well have been. Everyone in that room could see the truth. He was complicit. He was the reason Mina had gambled her marriage away, and now she was losing everything. David pressed further, highlighting not just the affair, but Mina's reckless spending, clothes, trips, gifts, all tied back to Richard. These were not contributions to the marriage, he said firmly. They were investments in her double life. By the time he finished, Mina's confident facade had crumbled. Her hands trembled as she tried to compose herself, but her eyes betrayed her panic. She wasn't in control anymore. She was cornered. The judge delivered his ruling. The assets would remain largely in my possession, the house included. Mina would walk away with far less than she expected. Just enough to keep her afloat, but nowhere near the fortune she thought she'd secured. The words marital misconduct hung heavy in the air, echoing like a gavel striking again and again. When it was over, Mina stared at me across the room, her eyes a mix of shock and fury. She had underestimated me. She had mistaken silence for weakness, patience for ignorance. But I had been watching, waiting, planning, and now she was the one left empty-handed. Richard stood stiffly, avoiding her gaze. I could almost see the calculations running through his head. What use was Mina to him now? She had no assets, no leverage, nothing but the stain of a scandal attached to his name. The same charm that had drawn her and would soon be turned on someone else, leaving her behind. As we walked out of the courtroom, David patted my shoulder. "You played it perfectly," he said. "Most men crack under the pressure. You didn't." I nodded, though I barely heard him. My eyes were on Mina as she stood in the hallway, clutching her purse like a life. The weeks after the divorce felt like waking up from a long, feverish dream. For months, I had lived in silence, my every move guided by suspicion, anger, and strategy. But now, the papers were signed, the gavel had fallen, and Mina was no longer my wife. I thought I would feel empty, maybe even broken. Instead, I felt something different. Clarity. Mina, on the other hand, was unraveling. At first, she tried to put on a brave face. She posted smiling photos online, clinking glasses of wine with friends, pretending that her life was still intact. But behind that veneer, the cracks widened quickly. She moved into a small apartment on the edge of town, far from the leafy suburb we once called home. The house, the symbol of the life we had built together, was mine now. Every time I pulled into the driveway, I felt a subtle satisfaction, not because of the bricks or the furniture, but because Mina had thought it would be hers too. Richard's presence in her life diminished almost immediately after the verdict. He had come to court that day, arrogant and sure of himself, but when the evidence poured out, his mask slipped. Afterward, he kept his distance, no longer showing up on her arm, sending her gifts. I heard through mutual acquaintances that he'd already turned his attention to a new assistant at his firm, young, impressionable, untouched by scandal. Mina, once radiant under his gaze, was yesterday's story. The betrayal that had once fueled her confidence now left her abandoned. She had gambled her marriage, her reputation, and her stability on a man who viewed her as disposable. When he left, she had nothing. No home, no asset worth bragging about, no husband who adored her. I would be lying if I said I didn't savor that. There was a day, about a month after divorce, when Mina called me. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. Her voice was quiet, stripped of the sharpness it once carried. "Daniel," she said, "can we meet? Just to talk?" I paused for a long time before replying. There's nothing left to talk about. Her breath caught, as if she hadn't expected me to be so cold. I didn't think it would end like this. I almost laughed. She didn't think it would end like this? No, of course she didn't. She thought she'd walk away with half of everything, cushioned by Richard's promises. She thought she'd reinvent herself while I crumbled. Instead, I had walked away stronger while she stood in the ruins of her choices. Life doesn't always give you the ending you want, I told her flatly. Then I hung up. That was the last time I ever heard her voice. In the months that followed, people began to see through Mina's facade. Friends who once admired her grew distant. Invitations stopped coming. Her so-called support system evaporated. Betrayal has a way of isolating people. Once you're branded untrustworthy, the crowd moves on. I, meanwhile, rebuilt. My focus returned to work. My colleagues respected me more than ever. Some had heard whispers of what happened, and the way I had handled it only deepened their admiration. I wasn't the man who lost everything in a divorce. I was the man who had outplayed betrayal, quietly, methodically, with precision. And yet, the victory wasn't just about money or reputation. It was about reclaiming myself. For so long, I had doubted my instincts, questioned my worth, and wondered if I was losing my mind. Mina had fed me lies until I didn't know what was real anymore. But the courtroom had set the record straight. The evidence was undeniable, the outcome final. I hadn't been crazy. I hadn't been paranoid. I had been right all along. Sometimes, late at night, I would pour myself a drink and sit in my office, the same way I used to when I first suspected her. But now, instead of staring at the ceiling in torment, I looked out the window at the quiet street, feeling a sense of peace. Mina was gone. Richard was irrelevant. And I was free. I never sought revenge in the traditional sense. I didn't scream at her. I didn't try to destroy her life with rumors. I didn't need to. Mina had destroyed herself. All I did was make sure she didn't drag me down with her. My silence, my patience, my strategy, that was my revenge. And the beauty of it was simple. Mina would have to live with the consequences of her choices. Every morning she woke up in that small apartment. Every time she scrolled past a photo of the life she once had, she would be reminded of what she lost. And she would know that it wasn't stolen from her. It slipped through her own hands. As for me, I walked away not just with my house, my assets, and my dignity, but with something far more valuable. The knowledge that betrayal doesn't have to define you. You can take it, hold it, and turn it into something that makes you stronger. Mina thought she could betray me with her boss. She thought she could play her game and win. But the divorce exposed everything, not just her lies. And that right there is how the story ended. Not with fireworks, not with screaming matches, but with silence and strategy. Mina thought she could betray me with her boss and still walk away victorious. But the divorce exposed everything. She lost the house, the comfort, the stability, and ultimately, she lost me. What she thought was power turned into weakness. And what she mistook for silence was my greatest strength. Now, I want to turn this story over to you. We've all faced moments in life where trust was broken, where someone we loved or depended on betrayed us. Maybe not on this scale, maybe not in a courtroom, but betrayal wears many faces. The question is, what do you take away from it? Do you react with anger, or do you step back, breathe, and find a smarter path forward? I'd love to hear from you. What lesson did you take from this story? What's one thing you learned here that you'd apply to your own life? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. And of course, if this story struck a chord with you, don't forget, if you like this video, please leave a comment below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel.